Part 38. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 371. Boom. 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 The walls of the cave trembled, and dust and gravel rolled down. The dwarves who were mining in other mines stopped their pickaxes and listened to the sounds deep in the mines, and they all changed their colors. What are they doing? I don't know. Have you encountered a monster? There have been no warcraft in this mine for more than 10 years, right? Should we go take a look? Let's go. Although we won't let others interfere in the selection of the king, it's okay to have a look. If there is really a danger, we should take action to protect the mine, right? The dwarves discussed chaotically, picked up mining picks and shovels, and rushed towards the mine tunnel where Rothaga was. I rushed to the mine entrance and took a look. There is no fighting. No danger. No blood, no thunder, no roar, not even sweaty mining. 5 dwarves, 1 human, and 1 barbarian, gathered leisurely at the door to chat. Those who brag, those who smoke, and those who cross their legs. Except for Rothaga, who was looking deep into the mine tunnel, ready to rush in at any time, the others were relaxing. The most annoying thing is that the human is chatting with the only dwarf girl. Girl. A rare girl in the mine tunnel. I held my head with that human, discussing and writing and drawing at the same time. His eyebrows were dancing with joy, he was talking and laughing, and his bright red twin tails almost flew up. Is it almost done? It's almost done. Gretel listened attentively. It seems that there are no more rocks rolling down. You can go in and drag the ore, Gavin. I will borrow your fiancée for a while. Is it useful if I say no? It's useless. Jin-na raised her head with a smile. She immediately lay down on the table again. Gretel, keep talking. That steam forging hammer. 4 dwarves and a barbarian filed deep into the mine. Not long after, they returned with a squeaking sound, carrying large baskets of ore, and fell to the ground with a crash. Beside the table, large chunks of black and grey ore have been piled into 3 piles as high as half a person. Ho, it's so convenient to use explosives to open mines. At this moment, we have been working for 3 days. Prince Rosga wiped the sweat from his forehead. It's just too expensive. Forget about mining fine gold and mithril. Ordinary ore is really unaffordable, Gretel, it cost you money. Hey, it's okay. Gretel smiled. I made all this myself. When I set out, Master Norwood helped me pack my luggage and stuffed a bag with it for me to use as I wanted. Is there enough ore? Not enough for me to explode again. Then, it's up to you. Gretel put on a mask, threw a bubble spell on himself, got up and entered the mine tunnel. Bernard got in front of him, used an iron drill to cut a hole in the front wall, and immediately retreated. Gretel faced the cave wall and breathed evenly. Burning hands. Freeze ray. Burning hands. Freeze ray. La 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 la, la 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 la, the cave wall is crisscrossed, with large and small gaps opening. Prince Rosga personally went into battle, dug a few pickaxes, and dug a medium-sized cave. Gretel stuffed the explosives inside, clapped his hands, and walked back leisurely. After walking around the corner, he lay on the cave wall with half of his head exposed, pointing at the explosive in the distance. Scorching ray. Boom. With the assistance of explosives, mining efficiency soared instantly. It only took Rothaga's team 1 day to mine 7 dwarves from the other teams, which required 10 days of hard work. And more than half of this day was wasted waiting for all the crumbling stones to fall. In short, while other teams were still sticking their butts out in the mine and using mining picks to dig out rocks, Greet's team had already dragged the broken and selected ore, leisurely, onto the road. On the way back, in full view of everyone, a small car was dragged behind everyone. Gretel? Except for Greet. When Bernard was about to pour the ore into his car and drag it away with him, Greet silently opened the space bag. What? They've already finished mining? So quickly? Archbishop Geronai frowned. The dwarves were all stubborn, smelly, and hard, like stones in a latrine. The Holy Sea of Glory had been operating for several generations before it finally infiltrated a tribe, the Black Rock tribe, which often prospected outside and rarely lived in groups. From getting close to, influencing, and making friends a little bit, to making the candidates believe in the Lord of Glory, the efforts, youth, and even lives that missionaries of all generations have put in can be said with blood and tears. In this king selection battle, the Vatican invested a large amount of resources, including mental calculations and unintentional ones, including the rare earth-burrowing devil insect. No less than 10 knights died just by surrendering it. To train a person below level 5 who can use mental power, the priest who controlled and commanded the demonic insects had crippled at least 5 more people. Everything is done to ensure that the candidates of the Black Rock tribe can win according to normal procedures. Only in this way can he convince the public, rule the dwarf kingdom smoothly in the next few hundred years, and make the entire kingdom lean towards the church little by little. But now it seems that the Firehammer tribe, the candidate of the king's tribe, is trying to equalize their advantage. Yes, not only is it fast, but the amount of ore mined is very large. In front of the archbishop, Bishop Glend, who came to report the news, quietly wiped his sweat. I saw them with my own eyes when they entered the city. There were several large cars. The dwarves next to me were saying that with so much ore, it was enough to build 2 sets of full body armor. Having more ore means there is room for refining, which means that it can be refined over time to create the best finished product. Before Archbishop Geronai set out, he also learned about casting in the Holy See and knew that this was not a good thing. He knocked on the table. Let Kai and the others speed up. Pry the carapace off the demonic insect first and start smelting in advance. Seize the best fire outlet and don't let the Firehammer tribe take it. Yes. Of course, it was impossible for Prince Rosga to occupy the fire mouth in advance. The ore has been dragged back and needs to be crushed, sorted, and crushed. After all the preliminary work is completed, the best ore powder can be taken to the furnace for smelting. Unlike here in the Black Rock tribe, the burrowing demon insects eat the ore and the metal carapace condensed on their bodies can be thrown directly into the furnace. Rothaga and the others mined the ore and wanted to process the ore on the spot. There are mountain streams near the mine, flowing water, and water hammers connected to water wheels. With the prince's connections, it was not a big deal to use a water hammer to hit the ore. However, Gretel insisted on returning to the melting pot. Not only him, but Gavin's fiancée, the female dwarf Jana, also stood unequivocally on Gretel's side. It's much easier to use a steam forging hammer to smash ore. I can do it. Leave this to me. I was very lucky today. I won 500 yuan in the lottery for 1,000 monthly tickets last month. Happy. Please vote hard so that I can have a chance to draw a lottery this month. Please give me monthly votes, recommend votes, book reviews, and all kinds of things. Thanks to @1115 for the reward of 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 372. Greet looked at the female dwarf Jina with eyes filled with admiration. He is a medical student himself, and his understanding of machinery, structures, transmissions, and various other things is roughly equal to I have heard the names. Don't ask him to do it by himself. Even if he is asked to draw a mechanical drawing, I'm sorry, I don't have a model in his mind. However, this dwarf girl is too strong. Greet pointed his fingers and said, I think we can make a transmission structure and connect the forging hammer to the steam engine. Then they started drawing pictures, making jingling noises as models, and banging out real objects. To be honest, there is no shortage of gears, rockers, and chains in the mine. Jin Na selected the parts of the right size, assembled them with skillful hands, adjusted them a few times, hammered the parts that were not the right size, and replaced the heavy forging hammers with lighter ones. It actually works. Bang, 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 bang. The hammerhead moves up and down, breaking large pieces of ore into small pieces, and breaking small pieces into pieces. With Prince Rozga borrowing the steam engine by showing his face, this is allowed. The rules of the King's selection battle are that no one else is allowed to help, and with Jinnah starting to assemble the machinery, everyone is left with only hard work to do. Moving ore, unloading ore, adding water to steam engines, maintaining machinery. Although busy, this job is already much easier than wielding a sledgehammer and smashing hundreds or even thousands of kilograms of ore into small pieces. Everyone looked at each other, with smiles on their faces, or giving Jinnah a thumbs up. Girl, awesome. Gretel was even more idle. While others were working hard and sweating, he sat aside after thinking out his thoughts, idly holding his cheek and counting. The big hammer is 80, the small hammer is 40, the big hammer is 80, the small hammer is 40. Have you dug so many mines? A head popped in to take a look. Greet didn't recognize it, but Gavin threw away the ore in his hand and ran over. Yes. We dug very quickly. Mr. Master was a big help. He was gesticulating and talking non-stop. After talking about mining, he led people to look at the forging hammer. Greet sat aside and watched two groups of people pass by in front of her, quietly dragging Jinnah. Can someone watch it? Of course, Jin Na looked at him in surprise. What can't people see when choosing a king? It's just for everyone to watch. Then, she raised her chin, sweating profusely, and moved pieces of ore under the forging hammer. What the candidates did, what the people in the team did, people from all races will see it. Only in this way can the best king be selected. Okay, I don't even think about keeping it a secret. That's okay, the situation of each team is transparent to the other 6 teams, no one can take advantage of anyone else. The steam forging hammer roared from afternoon to late night, and from late night to early morning. Gretel arrived at the construction site the next morning and saw Gavin sifting the ore hard while foaming at the mouth and talking enthusiastically. Ingvar and the others just finished mining and came back in the middle of the night yesterday. Judging from their ore, they should only be able to make a tomahawk. Max and the others haven't even finished digging the mine, but the mine they picked out produces cloud gold and redstone. The weapons will be more difficult to deal with by then. Tanla and the others have finished digging the ore and are dressing the ore locally. They will probably have to get the ore powder before they come back. Looking at the posture, it seems that every tribe is not left behind. Gretel was more concerned about the Glory Holy Sea and rushed to say, "How about the Black Rock tribe?" Black Rock tribe, bah. Gavin immediately changed his face and spat to the side. Guys who don't dig well and only use digging insects. It is said that the insects have eaten half of the mine tunnel. Yesterday, just yesterday, they already knocked off half of the insect shells. It is said that what was knocked out was directly metal, maybe an alloy. Greet frowned and didn't want to speak, but Prince Rozger stood up with a smile and patted Gavin on the shoulder. It's okay, we just have to do our best. With everyone's hard work and Mr. Mage's help, our progress has been advanced by 4 days, isn't it? There were horizontal and vertical lines on his face, sweat and dust flowed down together, but he smiled brightly. After saying this, he wiped his forehead with his sleeve and walked quickly to work again. Gretel followed to take a look. All the ore that was hauled back yesterday has been smashed, and several people are squatting on the ground to sort the ore. From Prince Rozga to Miss Jinnah, everyone has a painted face, and you can't tell the difference between male and female without looking at the beard. Greet had no idea about mineral processing and no optimization ideas. Seeing the smoke and dust everywhere, and the rhythm of pneumoconiosis every minute, he pinched his nose and used the bubble technique on everyone one by one. Sorry, I can only help you here. After he threw the spell, he turned around and left. Squat down at the entrance of the hole, concentrate on filling the rabbit's lungs with water. Fill one lung lobe, pump it out, fill it up again, pump it out again, fill it up again, pump it out again. It requires anesthesia, muscle relaxation, blood oxygen monitoring, and a ventilator to continuously blow oxygen. Gretel was concentrating on it, wishing that a person had 8 hands, and even the silver skeleton and invisible servants could be used, and beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. Large volume alveolar lavage, the number of unilateral lobe lavage can be 8 to 12 times. A rabbit is enough to keep him busy for a long time. Come on, greet. Today, 2 rabbits perform 40 operations. If they do not die, they will win. Greet, are you done? We have to leave. Prince Rosga shouted from behind. Gretel turned around and saw 5 dwarves and Bernard lined up in a single column, each pulling a small trailer filled with ore. Where to? Go to the big smelting furnace. The mineral processing is completed and it's time to smelt. Fine. Greet stood up, and Bernard had already hurried over, grabbed his rabbit and put it on the trailer. Prince Rosga shouted from the front. Work harder. Go faster. Let's find a good stove. After the 2 processes of crushing and beneficiation, the remaining ore was much less than the ore they mined, so Greet did not need to transport the ore. He put his hands in his pockets and followed the small trailer unsteadily. As he walked, he tilted his head and looked at the rabbit. Things look pretty good and I should be able to survive strong. Seeing the flames of the furnace in sight, Gretel stopped and released cold and heat resistance to himself, Bernard, and the rabbits on the minecart one by one. After just this delay, after casting the spell and moving forward, I suddenly heard Gavin's familiar loud voice, arguing with the other party. What are you doing occupying the opening of the fire? First come, first served. We got there first. You haven't finished mining at all. Why did you seize the fire first? Who said it wasn't? Look, isn't it already here? It turns out that although the furnace is blazing with flames, it is not equally hot everywhere. The magma flows all the way, and the temperature varies. Naturally, the higher the temperature, the higher the efficiency of smelting ore, and the better the refined iron produced. In some places, high-temperature gas often erupts, setting off raging flames, which are called fire mouths. Only with such a fire mouth can the most skilled craftsmen among the dwarves create weapons and armor that can be passed down through the ages. In this king selection battle, the melting pot opened 7 forging rooms for candidates to smelt and cast. Among the 7 forging rooms, there is only one fire vent, first come first served. Naturally, in order to save time, it is also your own fault if you do not do a good job in mining and mineral processing. The team hurriedly worked slowly. The steam forging hammer kept working all night last night, and they finally completed the preparatory procedures. As a result, when I ran here, the fire outlet was occupied by someone? Then wouldn't they have so much mineral sand going to waste? You only brought a small part, Gawain groaned angrily, almost wanting to start a fight with his opponent. This little bit of concentrate is not even enough to hit with a hammer. Who said that? The noise grew louder and louder, and there were more and more people outside the forge. Suddenly there was a creak, the door opened, and a black-bearded dwarf walked out. What's the matter? Ah, Prince Rosga, I've heard of you for a long time. Kai from the Black Rock tribe. Gretel paid full attention in the back row. Kai didn't look at him, smiled and stretched out his hand, holding Prince Rosga's right hand. I've always heard that you are a brave warrior. Can I ask for advice? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of Thanks to Ed for the 1500 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 373. The two thick right hands are tightly clasped together. Two warriors of high rank stood face to face and exerted force at the same time. The leather boots creaked under his feet. Gretel lowered his head and saw on the spot that the bricks under Prince Rothaga's feet had several thin cracks. Want to spar? Okay. Wang Zilang replied with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a burst of cheers from around him. Good. Simply. Bold. Those who worked, those who watched, and those who followed the team to watch the fun, a large group of dwarves all clapped their hands, stamped their feet, and cheered loudly. Gretel raised his head from the rabbit, looked at the surroundings, and could only sigh. Okay, dwarves regard grandeur as their beauty and their boldness as their beauty. If others come to discuss with you, you must not give in. Especially the candidates for the king selection battle. I would rather lose than shirk. Gretel and his rabbit were surrounded, or rather coerced, and moved out. The place of discussion is in the melting pot. What are you thinking? How is it possible? What if the two sides get angry and use a heavier hand, sending people flying into the melting pot? Even if people don't fly in, if they drop a hammer and hit the lava, they still can't fish it out, which is not good. Discuss, no. Compete, no. Plant flags, definitely in a professional location. Fortunately, there is a military zone not far from the mouth of the fire. Large groups of people moved to the competition ground, with 3 floors inside and 3 floors outside, tightly surrounding Rosga and Kai. Relying on his height, Gretel watched from a distance as they put on full body armor, picked up the heavy sword without an edge, and began to spar. Ping ping pong ping 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 pong. Then Gretel couldn't understand. I could only hear the sounds of cheering, and shouting all around me all the time, mixed with heavy sounds like forging iron, and the volume was estimated to reach 120 decibels. The two dwarves were going back and forth, swinging their heavy swords vigorously. Every time they collided, the crowd burst into cheers. How is the situation now? He leaned back and asked Bernard in a low voice. Bernard stared at the arena with a sullen face for a while, then shook his head. I'm afraid I'm going to lose. What? Gretel was shocked. Where did you see it? He looks evenly matched. His breath is messed up. Gretel said he still didn't see it. Breathing or something like that, unless you get close and let him count his breaths, or give him a vital signs monitor. But the dwarves at the scene had already started to make a commotion, and the cheers became smaller and smaller, followed by whispers and chatter. When 2 heavy swords clashed. The heavy sword in Prince Rosga's hand tilted to the side, and his feet slipped half a step, leaving the door wide open. Kai from the Black Rock tribe took advantage of the situation and took half a step forward. He held the sword tightly with both hands, raised it with all his might, and pointed it at the prince's chest. I lost. Prince Rosga dropped his heavy sword, wiped his sweat, panted and shook his head. Although he admitted defeat, he did not look depressed. He looked at the opponent levelly and did not dodge. Opposite him, Kai also inserted the tip of his sword into the soil, took a step forward, and reached out to him. You are a very powerful warrior. I look forward to fighting you again in a month. The 2 big hands were held tightly together and shook up and down a few times. Then, Prince Rosga returned his weapons and armor, squeezed out of the crowd, and called to his teammates. Let's go. If you lose the fight, you will naturally have no shame in occupying the fire mouth. The team dragged 6 mine carts, turned around collectively, and turned to another forging room. After walking for a long time, Gavin finally got into the forging room and closed the door. Then Gavin whispered. "Really? We obviously know that we have been busy all night, but now we come to challenge." "Don't say that." Prince Rosga finally calmed down his breath, smiled and shook his head. "He is indeed stronger than me. We have similar strength and skills, but his breath is long and his endurance is better than mine." "That's because he didn't keep mining." Gavin grabbed the advantage. "I've been mining and forging, and there's dust and smoke every day. Who can have stronger breath? He's running around in the wild every day, and he's competing with someone who's mining. How shameless." "But what to do now?" Hannah asked solemnly. The casting master kept squinting at the furnace, and from time to time he stretched out his hand and flicked it quickly in the hot air above the magma. "Without a fire outlet, it would be too difficult for us to smelt all the ore in time with so much ore. Do we need to buy a few less pieces? But your endurance is not as good as his, and if you wear less armor, it will be even more disadvantageous in a battle." Several dwarves gathered together and muttered. Some said to buy fewer pieces, some said to change the style of the helmet or breastplate, and some said to let Rosga do less work these days and take care of her body. After the discussion, some nerve was touched, and they all looked at Gretel invariably. "Hey, Mr. Mage, do you have any clever tricks?" Greet had been squatting in the corner watching the rabbit. "The breathing rate is normal, the body temperature is normal, there is no foaming, no sluggishness. It seems that this operation was relatively successful. Alas, it's a pity that rabbits can't communicate and can't control their lung capacity." He only raised his head when his name was called. "Think for a moment and look at the lava. I do have a way to smelt the ore, but I don't know if it can be done. It's the idea I came up with when smelting mithril concentrate, which is to insert a pipe into the lava and blow it out." "Gavin, you heard Master Tarbot say it? If so, can you explain it to them?" "I've heard about it. I'll tell you." Gavin jumped up on the spot. Showing hands and feet, squatting on the ground and spreading a layer of mineral sand, writing and drawing. A group of dwarves were doubtful, especially Hannah, who nodded and shook his head, but could not make up his mind. Greet thought for a while, then started taking things out of the space bag. Hand-operated generator, mercury arc rectifier, oxygen electrolyzer, oxygen pipe. These days he is doing alveolar lavage experiments, and he carries the set of equipment wherever he goes. At this moment, everything was set up one by one, with Bernard squatting on the side to shake the generator, and Feli and Hannah dragging the oxygen tube and cautiously approaching the lava. Pure oxygen spurted out cheesy, and a white fire immediately rose above the lava. Hannah's eyes that had been squinting opened instantly, and his eyelids were raised, stretching his narrow eyes wide. He almost rushed to the magma pool and stretched out his hand to test the airflow. Before his palm even came close, it trembled violently. "Yes. It can be used. It's such a big fire. Can it be bigger? This fire is too little, not enough. This." Gretel silently looked at the hand-cranked generator, and then at Bernard, who was squeaking and tossing the joystick. "Then we have to change places. Where you come from, where you go back." A group of 7 people dragged the ore back to the steam engine again and moved away from the guy. This time, the rotor of the hand-cranked generator was connected to a more powerful power. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. Asking for various. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 374. The steam engine puffed and puffed. The generator rotor sputtered. The electrolyzer was bubbling, oxygen was blowing out silently from the iron pipe, and white fire was rolling beside the magma pool. Jenna ran from the steam engine at one end to the oxygen tube at the other end. Gavin kept his mouth shut and held the frame, not daring to move. Fila and Prince Rosger sat on the ground with their feet pressed against the front, pulling on the bellows with all their strength. Hanna rolled up his sleeves, muscles on his arms flexed, and stared at the ore smelted in the white fire. With oxygen continuously blown into the furnace, the flame is raised to an extremely high temperature, and the ore smelting is particularly smooth. Layers of ore and charcoal are stacked on top of each other to create a fire in the furnace. The furnace was filled with orange and red, and only the most experienced eyes could see through the flames and see the ore turn red, soften, and turn into pig iron. Everyone is busy. Only Greet, who even contributed generators and oxygen generating equipment, couldn't water the rabbits. He moved closer to the furnace. He was afraid of heat and ashes, so he had to make himself a cold resistant and heat resistant, squatting on the side and watching the strings of bubbles in the electrolyzer. Crack! There was a sudden soft sound. Between the roar of the steam engine and the whirring of the bellows, there was almost no sense of existence. Gretel suddenly jumped up. The electrolyzer is no longer bubbling. Out of battery? What's wrong? A fuse tripped? No, this broken circuit doesn't have a fuse, so it doesn't matter if it jumps. Is the mercury arc rectifier broken? God bless you, but don't be. He stood far away, used his mage's hand to open the wooden box containing the rectifier, and looked at it carefully. There was darkness in the box, no blue sparks dancing, no pricking sounds. Then I threw myself in front of the generator and took a look, and there was a mushy smell. Stop, he shouted. The motor is burned out. The white fire is gone. Hanna also shouted at the same time. Suddenly, all eyes were fixed on Gretel. Gretel scratched his hair. Well, the steam engine is too big and the generator is too small. Let's make a bigger one. How big will it be? I don't know, anyway, the magnet is made larger, so the coil should be wound a few more times. The output power of the generator is related to the size of the magnet, should be the strength of the magnetic field, the number of turns of the coil, and the diameter of the wire. How to relate it specifically, how many turns and how big a magnet do you need to make to match the steam engine? Greet said that he was sorry, but when he was in high school, he only learned that cutting a wire through a magnetic field could produce an electric current. Then, goodbye. Finally, he still had basic common sense. If the coil was burned, the steam engine must be too powerful and the generator too small. Just make a bigger one. Relying on the fact that there was no one else on site who knew how to generate electricity, Greet bit the bullet and assumed the commanding role. Find copper wire. Insulate the copper wire. Find a larger magnet and cut it into a rectangle. What? Magnetic field strength. Hang a piece of iron in the middle, let the two magnets face each other across the iron block, and see which way the iron block swings. Build the frame, fix the magnets, rewind the wire. Gretel moved her mouth, Jenna moved her hands, and a group of men started to strike. The ready-made generator is stuck there, and making a bigger one is just like that. In the eyes of the dwarves, well, it's just a half-day effort. Moreover, because Gretel couldn't tell how big it should be, after one set of generators was finished, Jenna used the remaining materials to make a slightly smaller one. Set it up, reconnect the wires, and get started. In the furnace, the blazing white fire rose again. Gretel touched here and there to make sure that the coil was not heating up and that the electrolyzer was operating normally. He did not need to think about maintenance. Then he returned to the corner and continued to watch the rabbit. Holding the watch in his hand, he counted the rabbit's breaths one by one, and wrote down a note in the notebook after a while. After a while, Jin-na squatted down next to him, reached out to touch the rabbit's head, and twisted the long hair around her fingertips to play with it. After playing for a while, he asked in a low voice. Mr. Nordmark, why do you keep pouring water into this rabbit's belly? I am not pouring water into its stomach, but into its lungs. Gretel opened his mouth, wanting to explain, but he was afraid that the dwarf girl would be frightened. While he was thinking about how to make up a story, Gavin sat down next to him and asked. Yes, yes. Gretel, Grandpa said that you were pouring water into the lungs of animals along the way, just to practice that, lung cleaning, and so on. How is your practice now? Is it ready for use? Lung cleansing. What is lung washing? Can the lungs also be washed? Is it possible to pour water into it without choking? Several voices asked garbled questions. Gretel turned around and saw that except Hannah, who was still standing in front of the stove, several other dwarves were surrounding him. Either bending over and holding up his knees, or simply sitting on the ground, staring at him with burning eyes. Greet hesitated to answer. He is not 100% sure about lung cleaning and other animal experiments. How dare he try it on humans? Besides, even if you fail to treat ordinary dwarves, the problem won't be too big. Treating the king's son, not to mention causing a lot of complications, even if the effect is not satisfactory, it will become a diplomatic accident in a minute. Seeing that Greet refused to speak, Gavin said hey and reached out to shake his shoulder. He reached his hand halfway, but was grabbed by Prince Rosga and dragged back. Don't be like this, Gavin. Master Nordmark has already helped us a lot. If he wants to tell us what he is studying, he will naturally tell us. If he doesn't want to tell us, we shouldn't force it on others. As he spoke, he nodded and smiled at Gret, let go of his hand, and was the first to get up and walk away. Greet suddenly felt something in her heart. Etc. How? Gretel took out a glass and handed it to him, spit in it. After saying that, he took something out of the space bag. A large graduated flask, a large water tank, a thick glass piece, a curved glass tube, a funnel, clay. I took it out and shouted, Bernard, get me a bucket of water. Before the barbarians could arrive, Gavin quickly rushed over to fetch water. Gretel instructed him to fill the sink half full, fill the glass bottle with water, cover it with a thick glass piece, and put it upside down into the sink. Then remove the glass piece, insert one end of the bent tube into the mouth of the bottle, connect the other end to the funnel, and seal it tightly with glue. After finishing everything, he waved to Prince Rosga. Come on, take a deep breath and blow into the funnel. Press your face on it, don't let it leak. Blow as hard as you can. Rosga didn't know why, holding the spitted glass, she followed Greet's request and blew hard. Greet squatted beside him and looked at the scales on the bottle, counting one by one. 2600 ml. 2700, 2800. What is the normal lung capacity of a dwarf? Vital capacity is affected by factors such as age, gender, body shape, strength of respiratory muscles, and elasticity of the lungs and thorax. Dwarves are much shorter than humans, so their lung capacity should be lower than humans. However, these are powerful warriors, and their lung capacity should be much higher than that of ordinary athletes. The lung capacity of a normal human male is generally 3,500 to 4,000 ml, athletes can reach more than 6,000 ml. For dwarfs who exercise for a long time, what should be the normal value? Gretel scratched his head. If there are references to medical books from past lives when it comes to treating humans, cross-racial medical research is really too difficult for him. Is there any way to trick that guy over and test his lung capacity? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Today is the 25th, and there are only 705 votes. I hope that the 3-day double monthly ticket from the 28th to the 30th will help me reach 1,000 votes, and I will have a chance to draw a lottery next month. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 375. The obstacle that Gretel couldn't overcome even if he thought about it became easy when he got to Prince Rosger. I don't know who conveyed what, but by the time Gretel reacted, there was already a large group of noisy dwarves lining up outside the forge. Me. I came first. Let me go first. Let me blow it too. Gretel had to quickly make a bunch of forms. Write a piece of paper by hand, and then use scribe technique to change 1 into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. Fortunately, his space bag is big enough, and he keeps enough miscellaneous things in his daily life, so there is no risk of shortage of materials. A dozen scribes were photographed one after another, and the data tables were piled up in a thick pile. Soon, Gretel assumed the posture of a medical examiner and sat down in front of the table seriously. Name: Bonjun Firehammer. Age: 121 years old. Profession: patrol member. What level of warrior? Level 4. Smoking? That's for sure. How old were you when you started working as a miner? How old were you when you started working as a foundry? How old were you when you joined the patrol? I started learning mining at the age of 62, I started learning casting at the age of 81, I just joined the patrol team last year. Very good, it has been exposed to dust for 60 years. Greet did some mental calculations and secretly complained that the dwarves' constitution was too buggy, so they could still be alive and kicking, if it were a human, even if the duration of exposure to dust was not taken into consideration. Pneumoconiosis would still develop if the age was calculated directly after 15 years of continuous exposure to dust and heavy manual labor. Has it reached phase 2? He cursed silently, smiled, released a detection magic, and looked up. Behind Bonjun, the barbarian was holding his endless ink pen and standing solemnly against the background. The magic aura shone from the dwarf's back, illuminating small groups of shadows in his lungs, which were not obvious but could not be ignored. Tisk, after being exposed to dust for 60 years, I still have some shadows on my lungs. Greet made a note on the form, took out an alcohol cotton ball from the bottle, wiped the funnel at the top of the glass tube, and handed it to Bonjun. Come on, let's blow here. 1 person can be tested in 1 minute, and 60 can be tested in 1 hour. After working for 3 hours at a stretch, Greet lay on the table, too tired to even move, but that was not possible. He still had to organize the data by age, gender, exposure time, combat level. Why didn't the tower spirit help me sort it out? He misses the tower spirit of Babel Tower. Spread out the paper, put it underneath and scan, and decades of data can be entered, organized, and calculated for you. Fast, accurate calculation, comes with quality certification, produced by tailing, it must be a high-quality product. Wake up, it's impossible. Master Zimond floated from the side and complained. There is a floating mage tower that can move, even for level 15 mages. Wherever you want to go, the tower spirit will take you wherever you want to advance to legend. Gretel hit his head on the desk. No matter how hard it is, work must continue. The generator was spinning, the electrolyzer was beeping and steaming, and the furnace was filled with white fire. With the blessing of technological power, the speed of smelting iron ore is unusually fast, far ahead of other teams. Such achievements are like a royal flag raised high, attracting dwarves to come to visit in an endless stream. And Gretel was sitting at the door, waiting for the rabbit, no, waiting for the dwarf. C1, pull 1. Have you ever blown it? Come and blow it and see who has the strongest breath. So far, the highest record is held by Razel from the Steel Hammer tribe, 6,500 ml, and no one has broken it yet. Come on, come on. Another dwarf jumped up eagerly. First it was the Fire Hammer tribe, then the Steel Hammer tribe, and then the dwarves who usually lived outside the royal court and only came during the king's selection period also flocked over to visit. Prince Rosga accepted all comers and worked hard, letting them watch as they pleased. Soon, Greet saw members of the King's selection team from the Steel Hammer tribe, Silverbeard tribe, and even the Black Rock tribe among the visitors. That's right, I'm talking about that priest, from the glorious Holy See. Greet winked quietly. Bernard turned around and entered the forging room, dragged a wooden box and sat down on it. The black-robed priest didn't seem to notice his actions. He stood in the queue of dwarves, saw the spinning coils from the steam engine, then saw the steaming electrolyzer, and finally marveled at the continuous and stable white fire. After completing one lap, he left quietly without taking out his notebook to record anything on the spot. Greet pretended not to notice. He continued to greet the dwarves warmly. "Come and show off. Challenge the record." As soon as the Black Rock tribe people left the forging room, Archmage Serrano appeared. The high-level mage flicked his fingers, erected the sound barrier, and immediately grabbed Gray. "You're just going to let them see it? Secret. Big secret. A big secret that may greatly improve smelting efficiency. Let the people of the glorious Holy See watch it casually." "No problem." Gretel raised a smile. He led the Archmage into the forging room and pointed under Bernard. "Here's the secret." In the wooden box, the blue light emitted by the mercury arc rectifier was completely blocked by the wooden box. The secret of the steam engine could not be kept secret for long. As long as it is spread over a large area in the dwarf tribe and spreads to the Holy See, it is only a matter of time. However, the processing accuracy, sealing gaskets and subsequent applications of the steam engine are what the Parliament needs to hold in its hands. As for oxygen blowing smelting, just kidding. If you can't convert AC to DC, you can pass AC current directly into the water and you won't be able to get anything out of it. Besides, even if you know that direct current is needed, do you know what liquid can be electrolyzed? Did you know that before electrolysing water, you need to add sodium hydroxide to the water? Do you know that pure oxygen comes out of one opening and hydrogen gas comes out of the other opening? The hydrogen gas must be guided out properly, otherwise it will explode. Archmage Serrano couldn't help laughing. He nodded to Gretel a few times, turned around, and left. Gretel shrugged at his back, returned to the door of the forging room, and raised his smile again. "Who else hasn't boasted? Come over and challenge the record." All day long everyone worked hard. The ore that the team dragged back has been smelted into iron blocks. Judging from the volume, it is enough to create 2 sets of full body armor plus 2 dwarf battle axes and 2 war hammers. Early the next morning, Jin Na dismantled the generator and electrolyzer, and reconnected the forging hammer to the steam engine. Greet, on the other hand, took the tests, records, and data that he had compiled all night long to find Prince Rosger. Results of a large-scale test. At the same combat level, dwarves who have been exposed to dust for less than 40 years, that is, engaged in mining, smelting, casting, and often exposed to mineral dust and smoke, on average, are better than dwarves who have been exposed to dust for more than 60 years. Lung capacity is more than 10% higher. Moreover, the proportion of dwarfs who have been exposed to dust for more than 60 years has a much higher proportion of lung shadows. Obviously, even if they have not yet developed stage I pneumoconiosis, long-term mining-related work has damaged their lung function. Gretel's face was solemn. Rosga also straightened her face. So, if Kai has been running around in the wilderness and rarely engages in mining and casting, his lung capacity, that is, his breath, is likely to be 10% higher than yours. In battle, this is a very disadvantageous factor. Greet bent down slightly, the tables in his hands were crisscrossed, and the data were clearly listed row by row. Prince Rosga stood on tiptoes, looked at his hand for a while, and frowned. "So, what should we do? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 376. What to do? Gretel looked at Prince Rothaga without speaking. The dancing firelight reflected on the dwarf's face, which was as red as the reddish-brown beard. If it were his previous life, and if he had an entire tertiary-level hospital as his backing, he would definitely have only one answer. Go wash your lungs. Treatment experience in the past life: after large volume whole lung lavage, the vital capacity can increase by about 10% after 3 months of review. By the way, I directed you to the respiratory department and asked them to register for a full set of examinations: blood routine, liver function, kidney function, complete coagulation test, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, chest X-ray, electrocardiogram, B ultrasound, CT, pulmonary function. But he has nothing now. Greet basically did not have any of these tests to protect doctors, help doctors eliminate contraindications, and help with intraoperative emergency response. After much thought, he asked the other party a question. How high is the mountain we have to climb next? This question really stumped Prince Rosga. Dwarves are good at mining. Ask them to estimate how deep the mountain can be dug and how much ore can be produced. Experienced miners can estimate it. Ask them to estimate how high a mountain is. Dig vertical mine tunnels from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain. How deep does it have to be? They know the mountains they have dug before, forget about the mountains they have not dug. The mountain to be climbed for the King Selection event is the Holy Mountain of the Dwarves, and no one has ever seriously surveyed it. It takes 3 days to climb. He carefully recalled the story his father told and told Gretel seriously. It takes 3 days to climb from the foot of the mountain to the top. Gretel was silent. Who asked you how many days to climb? What I want to ask about is altitude. Altitude sickness may occur above 3,000 meters, with chest tightness, palpitation, and shortness of breath. A very small number of people may develop high-altitude pulmonary edema. Even if he really agreed to the operation, Prince Rosga accepted it, and the operation was a perfect success. Climbing a mountain above 3,000 meters before the liquid in the lungs has been completely absorbed and before the lung function has fully recovered is a court of death. If the respiratory doctor in the previous life knew that the patient wanted to die like this, he would definitely beat the patient to death first. But it was no use forcing the dwarves. There are some things that you can't do even if you are pressed for time, such as advanced mathematics, or answering the correct altitude of a certain mountain. Greet thought for a while and changed the question. Is there still snow on the top of the mountain in summer? There's snow. Snow all year round. Yes, you can see snow when you stand at the foot of the mountain and look up. That means the height exceeds the snow line. The problem is that the number of snow line is not fixed. In the tropics, it is more than 5,000 meters. Near the Arctic Circle, it may be only 2,000 meters. So now the question is, where is the dwarf royal court? Gretel didn't know what the latitude of this place was. He only knew that Nevis was neither hot in summer nor too cold in winter. It was rainy in winter and had a temperate oceanic climate. The dwarf palace is further north than Nevis city. The snow line here is estimated to be about 2,500 meters, not more than 3,000 meters. Assume that this place has similar values to the Earth. How high is the snow on the mountains in the summer? It's quite a big piece. Prince Rosga gestured with his hands. Anyway, you can see it from the bottom of the mountain. The elders say that when you climb to the top of the mountain in the hottest time of summer, you have to climb on the snow for a whole day. The last day is difficult. Well, the goats can't even climb to the top, so they have to rely on themselves. Every time I climb, I'm panting. Gretel asked back and forth for a long time before he was able to confirm that the altitude of the mountain peak must be above 3,000 meters, and should not exceed 4,000 meters, forgive him for being a scumbag. No wonder the last paragraph of the King Selection battle says the last person to finish the battle will fight. A group of dwarves who have been mining and blacksmithing all year round and whose lung function was damaged, braved altitude sickness and climbed to the top of the mountain carrying weapons. It was okay in summer, but in winter, it would be great if one or two people survived. Climbing to such a high place, the probability of high counterattack is very high. According to Gretel's character, or in other words, according to the doctor's character, he was strict in predicting the enemy. He didn't know whether high reaction would occur, but he treated it as if it would happen. In this case, the lung cleansing thing can be temporarily deleted. Gretel tidied up and looked at Prince Rosga seriously. A few ways. First of all, you are not allowed to smoke these days. That's it? Prince Rosga looked at the pipe on his waist with regret. After struggling for a while, he nodded cruelly, okay. He took out the pipe, put it to his nose and took 2 deep puffs of tobacco, then stuffed it back into his bag. Greet watched his stubby arms reach down completely, probably stuffing the pipe into the bottom of his backpack, and nodded. Secondly, is there any medicine that can help you cough and reduce phlegm? Remember to take it every day these days. Miners' lungs are not good because there is dust accumulated in the lungs. It is always good to cough up more. This item was agreed to, but when it came to the third item, Prince Rosga shook his head repeatedly and refused to agree to it no matter what. You want me not to forge? Not to work in front of the furnace? This is impossible. The weapons and equipment used in the King Selection battle must be made by the candidates themselves. This is indeed the rule for the dwarves to choose a new king. Whether it is a prince, a knight leader, or a clan leader of each tribe, all the weapons and armor he uses must be hammered out with his own hands. Even if you have a steam forging hammer, you have to use pliers to hold the iron piece, put it into the furnace, heat it red, and then put it under the hammer head. People come and go in the forging room, and everyone can clearly see which candidate performs what, and lazy people will not be able to convince the crowd even if they get in. However, stopping exposure to dust is a necessary condition for the treatment of pneumoconiosis. Gretel tried to persuade her several times, turning the data sheet over and over to explain, but Prince Rosga would not agree to it anyway. There is no other way, Gretel can only come up with a backup plan. In this way, wear your mask tightly when you work, and I will release the bubble technique for you. The bubble technique is about to expire, come to me immediately for a replacement, don't be lazy. In addition, Gretel also obtained phlegm-eliminating herbs, extracted the medicinal oil, and allowed Rosger to breathe the mist of the evaporated medicinal oil. He sat next to the water tank, put his palms against the tank, and concentrated the ultrasonic waves, adjusting the wavelength, power, and landing point. Bubbles rolled in the water tank, and thin mist rose. Rotherga inhaled hard into her lungs, and after a while, she turned around and coughed up thick black-gray phlegm. After several steps together, Prince Rosga felt that his breathing gradually became easier and his chest no longer felt tight. The steam forging hammer jingled, and when the first war hammer was forged into shape, he plunged into the pool next to the royal court and was able to swim more than 10 meters further than before. Seeing that the prince's lung function had improved and he no longer needed to rush to the shelves, he was forced to perform lung washing surgery, and Greet also gave him some snacks. The forging hammer went up and down, and the breastplate, shoulder armor, and leg armor were formed one by one. Everyone was beaming with joy. Progress is rapid. Complete the complete set of equipment within half a month, it's not too late. At that time, you can put on full body armor and participate in the king selecting battle. Compared with those who only have one weapon, or one weapon and one breastplate, the full body armor naturally gives them a huge advantage. Greet is also happy. His technique has improved greatly, and he has not killed a rabbit for 5 days in a row. The team made a large room for him alone, with rabbit cages lined up in a row, and 20 rabbits jumping around. Live. Live. Food intake is normal, body temperature is normal, and mental condition is good. Do a few more sets to ensure a 100% success rate, and then you can try to enter the clinic. Of course, not now. I'm going mountain climbing in 2 days, so I need to pack my gear. Clothes, tents, food, and drinking water. Even if his teammates can prepare them, Gretel still has to get some and put them in his space bag. He saw the rabbit, said goodbye to his teammates, returned to the trade group station in Mithril district, reported the situation to Archmage Serrano, and asked for 2 pieces of self-defense equipment. By the way, I also need to ask the Archmage to fill a few bottles of oxygen in preparation for breathing oxygen on the mountain. In the middle of the discussion with the Archmage, Gavin rushed in, sweating profusely. Gretel, come over and take a look. My grandpa is dying. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. There are only 747 monthly tickets now. I can only hope that everyone will do their best during the double period in the last 3 days. I want to draw a lottery. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 377. What? Master Tarbot. Gretel jumped up, and was immediately grabbed by Gavin, running away. Archmage Serrano glanced at Mage Zamond. The medical magician nodded and followed slowly. Half for Master Talbot. Everyone has been walking together all the way here. Even if the mission is over just to deliver the person to the destination, we still hope that the old dwarf will be well. Not to mention, with this master here, there will be one more person who can speak for the Magic Council. Half for Gretel. Serrano has learned a lot about this little mage's ability to escape, and he can come up with surprises anytime and anywhere. Now that Master Tarbot is critically ill, Serrano is really afraid that he will act impulsively and make some risky move. For example, wash the old man's lungs or something. Having someone watching makes me feel more at ease. Wizard Hammond followed Gretel, the tracking spell on his body threw an acceleration spell on himself, and he arrived at the old dwarf's residence without much speeding up. The room was already in chaos, with people shouting, running, trying to wake up the old dwarf, shouting for the priest. In the chaos, Gretel rushed in and rushed to the old man's bedside. A distinguished bloodline change was thrown up, and he immediately ordered the old dwarf to be given high-flow oxygen. Improve the working efficiency of the oxygen generator, improve the purity of oxygen, and increase the speed of oxygen supply. Just kidding, the color of the light curtain fed back by the newly developed blood oxygen identification magic tends to be dark red. If it gets darker, it will be the color of venous blood. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. Let him take oxygen. Gretel's urgent voice immediately suppressed the entire audience. The whole room heard him shout alone. Bernard, shake it faster. Shake it faster. What are you doing? If you don't use the healing technique immediately, why are you asking people to shake the poles and blow the bellows? In the crowd, a dwarf priest with white hair frowned and asked. He was old, and the skin on his arms was as shriveled as Master Tarbot's. Even when he asked questions, his voice was gentle and slow. While speaking, the healing technique did not stop for a moment, and the gentle white light shot out from the head of the warhammer, wave by wave, gently sweeping over Master Talbot. Greed was too busy adjusting the oxygen tube spawning vines to answer. On the contrary, Master Tarbot's disciple, Vigilant, who had escorted him all the way back, stood by and explained to him. The teacher felt uncomfortable along the way, and he only recovered by breathing in this gas. The old pastor hummed and stopped talking. Master Zimond also retracted his steps and stopped rushing into the crowd. Sure enough, it was right to come and take a look. The little guy rushed forward and presided over the rescue, regardless of whether he could be saved alive, or how many high-ranking priests were at the scene, or how shocking the methods were. Just like the time he rescued the orcs, he had to open his chest if he disagreed. That's heartbreaking. If Greet hears his voice, he will definitely retort, of course he must preside over the rescue. In terms of treatment skills, he may be beaten by high-ranking priests. In terms of rescuing critically ill patients, he can definitely stand up and say, I am the professional. In fact, some are too professional. For example, when it comes to oxygen inhalation, the correct instruction should be increase the oxygen flow rate, use a mask to inhale oxygen, and the oxygen flow rate is 10 liters/minute. However, no one at the scene understood his instructions. Gretel could only look at the size of the air pump, listen to the hissing sound in the hollow vines, and kept shouting. Gavin, follow my command and blow the bellows. Pull. Push. Pull. Push. Pull. Push. Very resentful. What he needs now is an anesthesiologist in the modern sense, not a priest who can only throw pain-killing magic. Greet silently cursed, his eyes and hands never stopping. The surgeon is in charge of the disease, and the anesthesiologist is in charge of life. Such tasks as adjusting oxygen flow, oxygen concentration, temperature, and humidity are obviously the responsibility of the anesthesiologist. Fortunately, the handling of high-flow oxygen inhalation is very correct. After a lot of tossing, Master Tarbot finally recovered, half leaning on the bed and breathing heavily. Gretel was able to stop and wiped his sweat. We are out of danger for the time being. Tonight, don't let Master lie flat, half reclined, and keep low-flow oxygen. This is the oxygen generator, keep it on and don't stop it. Don't be tired these days, don't smoke, keep it up, the mood is stable, others in the room are not allowed to smoke. It is best not to light a fire in the room, but keep warm. He rattled off the doctor's orders one by one, fearing that missing any of them would worsen his condition. It took him a long time to finish the instructions and let out a long breath. There is nothing else to pay attention to. You take good care of Master, I'm leaving. Gretel, Gavin rushed forward and grabbed him. Is there no other way? Grandpa, besides being careful all the time, is there no other way to cure it? Gretel shook his head silently. Pneumoconiosis is irreversible, especially in the late stages, when there is extensive fibrosis and widespread infection in the lungs. Basically, the only path is to collapse and wait for death. At least, that was the case in his previous life. And here, if divine magic was effective against pneumoconiosis, there wouldn't be so many dwarves bothered by the disease. To put it bluntly, Master Tarbert is also a level 13 priest, so it doesn't necessarily mean that he can't even cure himself. Gavin dropped his shoulders in disappointment. However, Vigeland stretched out his arm, stopped Gretel, and looked at him eagerly. What about the ones you've been researching recently? What about lung cleaning? Can it be used now? Cannot. Can't. Two voices answered simultaneously. One is Gretel and the other is Master Hammond. As the mage answered, he squeezed into the crowd and reached out to hold Gretel. That technology would even choke animals to death, so it can't be used on humans. But, Gretel has fed 20 rabbits in the past few days, and none of them have died. The little guy doesn't tell anyone anything, and he can't even keep up with the people who help him get out of trouble. Master Zimond cursed secretly, and when he was about to refute, a majestic voice suddenly sounded from the corner of the crowd. What about lung cleansing? Will it help? The dwarves instantly separated to both sides. Master Hammond looked along the empty space and could only let go of Gretel and bowed his head in greeting. Your Majesty the King. Your Majesty, the king Greet followed and saluted. He immediately raised his head and explained seriously. The method of washing the lungs is to pour clean salt water into the lungs and then pump it out to bring out the dust in the lungs. This technique is very dangerous and may cause people to choke to death. Moreover, Master Tarbert he is too old and physically weak. He will not be able to withstand this method and will die. He explained in as much detail as possible, trying to dispel the dwarves' thoughts. Originally, Master Tarbert was too old and had a lot of contraindications, so he would never be able to perform this kind of surgery. Unexpectedly, the king listened carefully and smiled. So, your method is used to help us expel dust from our lungs and restore health. Yes, it is. So, what do you think of me? Can you do it on me? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 378. What? You clean your lungs? Greet almost suspected that he was hallucinating. Your Majesty, I just said that Master Tarbert is too old to wash his lungs, but he is only over 350 years old. You are already 400 years old. 400 years old. For a moment, a majestic song seemed to ring in Gretel's ears. I really want to live another 500 years. He shook his head vigorously. At the same time, Master Hemon took a step forward and pulled him behind him. Gretel. That's not necessary. No, you can't do it either. Greet's face darkened. He broke free from Master Zimon's hand, stepped forward, and stood directly in front of the king. You are too old. This treatment method is suitable for younger patients with milder symptoms. To be precise, patients with stage 0 pneumoconiosis and stage I pneumoconiosis have better outcomes, stage 2 patients have worse outcomes, and stage 3 patients have even worse outcomes. Of course, this does not need to be explained in detail. Hey, even though I am old, I am still in good health. The king stood in front of Gretel with a smile and refused to go away. He raised his palms and beat his chest loudly. Even though I'm 400 years old, when I was young, I was a level 15 warrior. Even now, young man, your physical strength may not be as strong as mine. If you don't believe me, let's break your wrist and give it a try. You are in good health, so there is no need to abdicate. Gretel silently cursed. He took a deep breath and was still about to argue, but Vigeland had already taken a step forward and turned half sideways to face the old king. Greet's short and squat torso was blocked in front of Gretel. Although due to the influence of his height, the blocking effect was not in place at all, and it did not prevent him from speaking loudly. Your Majesty, let me do it. I am young and in good health. I'll do it. Gavin jumped up. I'm younger. I'm in better health. It's my grandfather who's sick, I should be allowed to try. You still want to participate in choosing the king? I'll do it. The dwarves quarreled. Their thick and short arms were waving at each other, almost starting to fight on the spot. Greet took a step back, another step, another step. Hey, no one asked me if I wanted to do it. Do you still want to do it now? A gentle laugh sounded. Gretel suddenly turned around and met the smiling eyes of Master Hemond. His smile was half indulgent and half curious. You started tossing about this on the ship. I thought you wanted to gain more bargaining chips. But now that the negotiations are over, you are still trying. Do you think you can help them? Gretel quickly looked around. Master Hemond shook his finger. It's okay, I've set up a sound barrier. Hey, let's get back to the topic. Is lung washing really effective? It's really useful. If the symptoms are mild, washing it once can relieve the symptoms for 2 to 3 years. The chest will not be tight or painful. But it is also very dangerous. It took me so long to achieve all animal experiments successfully. The two mages chatted quietly and retreated to the corner of the tent. As he backed away, Greet suddenly felt a stiffness behind his back, as if there was something blocking him. Turning around suddenly, an old dwarf stood behind him with a smile, holding a long staff diagonally in his right hand, and the white light on the staff head flickered slightly. Greet recognized him as one of the elders attending the banquet. Just as he was about to salute, the old dwarf winked at him. "Mr. Master, how young a patient must be for you to be confident." "I didn't say I wanted to be cured," Gretel almost jumped up. The old dwarf smiled so hard that he narrowed his old eyes, and with a hint of cunning in his kindness, he waved his hand. "Hey, I've seen everything you just said." "No way, as you live a long time, you can always learn some things that you don't have, such as human language, such as lip reading." Gretel wanted to roll his eyes. The old dwarf suddenly stopped smiling and said seriously, "Mr. Mage, I have lived for almost 400 years, and I can see good intentions and bad intentions most clearly. You are a friend of our dwarves, and you came here with the intention of helping us." He took a step forward and gently placed his palm on Gretel's wrist. "Superior. Injuries during mining and casting have troubled us for thousands of years. As long as you have a way, even if you are only half sure, we are willing to ask you to try." After speaking, he stroked his white beard, bent down deeply, and bowed to Gretel. The dwarf was already short, so when he bowed, his head almost touched Gretel's knees. Gretel hurriedly helped. "Hey you!" Greet used all his strength to lift the old dwarf up, and he was already sweating from the effort. At this point, there was no point in going around in circles anymore. Master Zimon simply took everyone to sit down and spoke seriously. "First, lung washing is very dangerous. If you are not lucky, it is not surprising that half of the people will die. If something goes wrong, the dwarf kingdom must not hold them accountable and must ensure Gretel's safety in the royal city. Second, the recipients sign up voluntarily and are chosen by Gretel. No one can force anyone he doesn't want to treat. Third, the dwarves must send out the best healers to help, providing healing techniques at any time to ensure safety." 1, 2, 3, and 4 were explained clearly, and he even spread out a magic scroll and solemnly drafted the contract. The dwarf elder presided over the prayer to God the Father. In the flash of white light, the king bit his finger and a bloody fingerprint fell on the scroll. On the Parliament side, Archmage Serrano, who came after hearing the news, led Master Zemund and Greet to leave magic marks one after another. After all the procedures were completed, Greet turned around again. Led by Prince Rosger, Gavin, Jana, and Master Talbot's disciple Vigeland, there was a bustling crowd, with 20 or 30 people standing in front of him. "What are you here for?" Greet had a headache just looking at him like that. The prince raised his eyebrows and smiled calmly. "If something is good for the tribe but is dangerous, of course I should be the first to try it. Right. Gretel, get out." This movement shocked more than 100 people even in the Firehammer tribe. Early the next morning, when the operation started, there were people standing on 3 floors outside the door. In addition to the elder who presided over the signing yesterday, there were 5 priests standing at the bedside of Vigeland, who was the first to receive treatment. "Don't be afraid, as long as you don't die on the spot, we can save you. Greet, it's not that dangerous." He was already familiar with rabbits, so when he switched to dwarves, he only needed a little more water. After the local anesthesia was applied, the vines entered silently with the secret eye. As soon as they turned half a circle, the dwarves in the room pointed at the light screen reflected by the secret eye and started talking loudly. "It's so dark." "Yes, it's pitch black. We don't have all this in our lungs, right? No wonder the more work you do, the more uncomfortable your chest becomes. With so much dust, can you not feel uncomfortable?" Gretel smiled slightly, not surprised at all. Seeing his "I knew it earlier" look, the dwarf priests became more trusting. They stared at his hands with 12 eyes and waited for him to make a move. Even the questioning voices became quiet. Greed took his time and picked up a few seeds on his fingertips, urging the vines to grow inwards. One goes to the left, one goes to the right. The one going to the left is particularly enlarged in the middle, blocking the bronchus, and pure oxygen is fed in. The one going to the right waits for the lung lobe to completely deflate, and then pours sterile saline into it. Inject, extract. Come out, come out. The 5 dwarf priests stretched their heads to look. The extracted liquid fell into the negative pressure drainage bottle, in small streams, and soon half of the jar was accumulated. There's so much dust in there. A bottle of water is black, no wonder it's called lung cleaning. Inject and withdraw physiological saline, inject and withdraw. Greed strictly followed the operating procedures. After washing the lungs 3 times, he gave high-flow oxygen until the blood oxygen saturation returned to normal. Then inject again, then withdraw. Repeat 3 times a cycle, 9 times in total, until the drawn liquid changes from turbid to clear. Then, switch to one lung lobe and continue washing the lungs. It was all over, the anesthetic spell was lifted, and Vigilant jumped up. I'm fine. I finished washing it alive. Greed, get out. I thought I was taking a bath for you if I didn't know. Tomorrow is the double period. Please start tomorrow and be sure to vote for me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 379. Of course Gretel couldn't let Vigilant go. Not only did they not let him go, but they also shouted, "Lie down," and reached out to press him. Are you kidding me? You just finished cleaning your lungs, and if you don't just lie down and take oxygen, why don't you want to get up and dance? Gretel's physical combat power is only level 1, may have degraded to level 0. Even with the power of the barbarian bull, it is impossible to hold down a dwarf warrior. Fortunately, he doesn't have to do it himself. Since the success of the lung cleansing operation, Gretel has been labeled as a shining miracle doctor. As long as you shout and make a gesture, there will be people at all times helping to hold people down. The 4 dwarf priests standing beside the operating table pounced on him at the same time. 2 on each side, one hand standing by the head presses the arms and one hand presses the shoulders, one hand standing by the feet presses the knees and the other hand presses the hip bones. 4 people put on most of their weight at the same time, and Vigilant said on the spot. He rolled his eyes. When he rolled his eyes, the 5th priest, the dwarf elder who presided over the signing, stood above him, raising the war hammer in his hand, his light shining, and he stared at him eagerly. Vigilant /U0026 Gretel, it doesn't have to be like this. In any case, under the influence of strong external force, Vigilant showed extremely good compliance. He would lie down when he was told to lie down, take oxygen when he was told to take oxygen, and he would honestly not speak when he was told not to speak. As for winking, Greed pretended not to notice it. Gretel stayed on guard, lowering the oxygen flow bit by bit. Coupled with the repeated use of healing skills by the priests, Vigilant's recovery progressed to the point where he could stop oxygen inhalation at noon that day. Distinguish bloodline change was released, and the light screen was bright red, no different from arterial blood. Vigilant jumped to his feet again. Wow, ha ha ha, I succeeded. I washed my lungs successfully. I feel now, better than ever before. Come and arm wrestle. Come and run in circles. Come and compete in martial arts. Greed, sit down. Who allowed you to go away? Come and test your lung capacity. Let me see your lungs again. The test results were very promising. Forced expiratory volume in 1 second, vital capacity, and maximum ventilation, the three representative values of lung function, increased by 15%, 8%, and 21% respectively. Greet was worried and took Vigeland for another ultrasound, which showed that the water in the lungs had almost been absorbed. You know, the amount of fluid left in the lungs is more than 500 ml. Is the function of the treatment technique in absorbing fluid from the lungs so strong? If this is the case, you may not need to observe for too long after the operation, nor do you need to inhale oxygen for too long. You know, he heard gossip from his colleagues in the respiratory department that miners, casters, and welders who come for lung cleaning usually have to be hospitalized 14 days, some people with pneumothorax will need to be hospitalized for nearly 30 days. Greet made a note in the case book to remind himself to pay special attention to this point in the later medical treatment. His eyes followed Vigeland, watching him run out of the room, talking, laughing, and beating his chest. Whenever someone passes by, he will grab him and point fingers at him. Then, as long as he grabs one, he can attract at least 10 people to visit. Look, this is the water washed out of my lungs. The whole house was shaken by him. The braided dwarf held his head high and pointed at the rows of drainage bottles. The gray beard curled up and down, almost swaying over his shoulders. This is the first time I washed it. Is it dirty? Just like washing clothes, the first time is always the dirtiest. The drainage bottles are placed in rows, open and open, for anyone to look at. Greet arranged them in 2 columns and labeled them, making them more contrasting. When the water comes out of the first wash, there is mud and dust underneath, and the entire bottom of the bottle is black. After washing with water for the second time, the dust will be significantly reduced. The third time, the water was clearer, and until the last bottle, no dust or dirt could be seen inside or at the bottom of the bottle. I'd say he is a miracle doctor. He can cut open a person's chest and heart, and he can still save life. He can fill a person's lungs with water and then suck it out, and the person can still be alive. To tell you the truth, I'm feeling great now. The whole person seems to have lost 2 pounds. Miracle Dr. Gretel sat on the edge of the hospital bed, holding the medical record book and recording his thoughts in the header and footer. During the operation, the patient developed hypoxemia twice. He relied on timely drainage of lavage fluid, timely oxygenation by lavage of one lung and magical support to turn the situation around. It is unclear whether the pH of the blood is imbalanced, there is a lack of ECG monitoring, and we hope that relevant spells can be developed as soon as possible. Alas, sorrow. It would be nice to at least have CT when doing large volume whole lung lavage. There is no CT, only chest X-rays, and I always feel uneasy. After successfully washing Vigeland's lungs, Greet completed another treatment that afternoon. This time, the number of people crowding outside to watch the fun increased several times, and the number of priests in the room who stood and watched openly in the name of helping increased to 15. Fortunately, the dwarf's house is big. If the room was only the size of a standard operating room and the operation required a strict sterile environment, Greet would have to drive people away. The afternoon session was equally successful. In the evening, Greet returned to the trade group station and continued to pack his luggage, preparing to climb the mountain with the King Select team tomorrow. Halfway through the preparation, Archmage Serrano sent someone to call him over. Upon entering, 3 dwarf elders and 4 assistants lined up in the conference room, posing for trade negotiations. Greet, in view of the outstanding effect of lung washing treatment, the dwarf kingdom intends to invite you to stay for a while. Archmage Serrano got straight to the point. They want you to stay temporarily in Wangting and treat as many patients as possible. The conditions are the same as before, of course, the remuneration will be calculated separately. Do you agree? Gretel looked around. To Archmage Serrano's left, Master Shimond winked at him with encouragement. To his right, Master Harry, who had worked on the steam engine together before, had a solemn face and seemed to disapprove. The Archmage's face was dark and enigmatic, and it was hard to tell whether he agreed or disagreed. So is it for me to go, or is it for me to say no? How long do I have to stay here? Treat all patients. This is impossible, right? If I don't come back with the trade group, will I come back on my own, or will the dwarf kingdom send someone to escort me? Gretel hesitated. But the desire to treat the patient prevailed in the end. Just as he was about to open his mouth to agree, he felt his foot being kicked hard, which even hurt a little. Greet lowered his head reflexively and saw Wizard Harry opening his palm under the table and showing him a holy emblem of the Lord of Radiance. Gretel was stunned. The king-selecting battle is not over yet, and someone is still causing trouble. He immediately swallowed his words of agreement and put on a smile. Personally, I am very willing to help the dwarf brothers and try to recover as much as possible. However, I am a member of the Parliament's trade group and must obey the arrangements of the Parliament. In this way, after the king selection event is over and the new king ascends the throne, can we talk about this? Double monthly passes from today to September 30th. From today to September 30th, from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. Thanks to @Kutanshari for the 1,500 starting coins. Thanks to for the 100 starting coins for the reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 380. Did that infidel really say that? Archbishop Geronai's voice was light, neither happy nor angry. However, in front of him, a black-bearded dwarf with a hood hanging behind his head quickly bent down. That's right, what he said is to wait until the king's selection is over before deciding. So cunning. If the results of the king's selection are not what they want, do they just want to leave? Archbishop Geronai lowered his eyes and pondered. The black-bearded dwarf glanced at him quickly, then lowered his head. That, washing the lungs or something, can we do it? There is no doubting the power of our Lord, Archbishop Geronai said casually. The black-bearded dwarf quickly bowed to apologize. Archbishop Geronai pondered for a moment and then ordered slowly. If you spread the word, just say that the mage can only treat 2 people a day. Even if he stays in the royal court for a year, he can only treat more than 700 people. This number of people is not enough even if all the Firehammer tribe takes over. It is not enough take care of others. Go ahead. The black-bearded dwarf Nyanyo retreated. Archbishop Geronai was lost in thought for a moment, and took several subordinates to Pastor Martin to discuss with him. Can we do that lung cleaning? Pastor Martin had a rabbit lying on his lap, stroking its fur, and was lost in thought. He has been rooted in the Northland for decades and has treated thousands of dwarves and barbarians. Some of them have suffered from chest tightness, chest pain, and breathlessness after having been ironed for hundreds of years. He only knew how to use the holy power to nourish and comfort him, give some herbs to relieve coughs and reduce phlegm, and pour water into his lungs to wash. Occasionally, I thought of this idea, but it only flashed and was thrown far away into a corner. Human lungs are not like clothes. You can wash them, rub them, and then pour out the dirty water. Who knew that someone actually succeeded in this seemingly absurd method? He thought about it, but there was always something he couldn't figure out. Greet did not prohibit people from watching when he was treating patients. The process of his operation was always heard in bits and pieces, but when he thought about it together, there were always some hurdles that he couldn't get past. For example, how do you pour water into one lung without flooding the other? At this moment, Archbishop Geronai knocked on the door and asked. Pastor Martin thought for a moment and shook his head. Among other things, to pour water into people's lungs, we need to use vines spawned by pagan magic. I thought about it for a long time, and there is really no substitute. Archbishop Geroni nodded and said nothing. To his right, a young bishop spoke. No need for a tube, how about direct irrigation? Then how do you do it? Pastor Martin raised his eyes slightly and looked over. It was Bishop Clint who made the suggestion. He pressed the armrest of the seat, leaned forward, and his two thin lips were like knives. He turned over a suggestion. Drowning technique. Pastor Martin's face immediately darkened. Drowning is not a magical healing technique, but a secret method used by the Inquisition to torture prisoners, using magic to pour water into the prisoner's lungs. The person's appearance looks normal, but the feeling of struggle and pain is no different from real drowning. The only difference is that there is still breath left in the throat, and I can barely manage to say a sentence or two. No matter how stubborn a man is, he will go back and forth 3 or 5 times before he will seize that breath and confess desperately, saying whatever he is told. The difference in the level of a spellcaster is nothing more than the power of the magic and the timing of dispersing the magic. A master can make life worse than death. If he meets a novice, he will die. When Pastor Martin was young, he also spent time in the Inquisition. He saw a lot of various methods and used many of them himself. Then one day I suddenly felt something was wrong, so I went far to the north to make a living by educating the barbarians. Even the small church was built by him hand by logging wood and quarrying stone. He recalled the situation back then and glanced at Bishop Clint, his eyes as sharp as a knife. After just one glance, he lowered his head in silence and said in a light voice, "I don't think it's necessarily possible. You must do it, try it on animals first, and don't kill anyone." Of course. We tried this method to make friends with the dwarves, not to make enemies with them. Archbishop Geroni immediately smiled. However, after saying goodbye and leaving, he took out a money bag and threw it directly to Bishop Clint. "You should give it a try. It's best to have results before they go down the mountain." Clint nodded and followed the order. "Isn't it just the drowning technique? What's so difficult? It's just a first-level magic. Drowning technique. This magical technique is based on the same idea as deep breathing of the conjuration system, except that one is to fill people's lungs with air, and the other is to fill people's lungs with water." Clint found a few sheep in the kitchen, fiddled with them twice, and quickly mastered the essence of the spell. "Next, it's time to try it on people." He held the money bag given by Archbishop Geroni, and did not dare to cheat directly, or hire a few dwarves. Instead, he wandered to the trading area. In the trading area of the Dwarf King City, there are a wide variety of commodities, including slaves, humans, barbarians, orcs, everything else except no one dares to buy or sell dwarves here. Bishop Clint turned around and quickly came back with 4 slaves. What he bought were young human males. They were not the most expensive, but they were not cheap either. The purse Archbishop Geroni threw at him was half empty on the spot. When he returned to his residence, he called out one of them at random, and without any explanation, he threw away his magic spell. Drowning technique. The slave who was called out tried his best to open his mouth. He wanted to breathe, but couldn't take a breath in. He could only blush, and reflexively reached out to dig at his chest. It wasn't until blood marks were dug out on his chest that he curled up and collapsed on the ground. Bishop Clint waved his hand to disperse the spell. "How about it?" The slave knelt on the ground and shivered, his forehead pressed tightly to the ground, and he even suppressed a cough without daring to cough. Bishop Clint looked down at him and nodded. "As long as you're alive. Stand up and do it again. Once, twice, 3 times." After 3 consecutive drowning techniques, the young slave collapsed on the ground, blood foaming from his mouth, and it seemed that he would not survive. Bishop Clint glanced at him with disgust, took out his handkerchief and wiped his hands. A slave is a slave, and his constitution is not good enough. He couldn't bear it after only 3 times. That pagan washed the lungs 9 times on one side, a total of 18 times. Fortunately, slaves can be bought if you have money. Bishop Clint consumed one group of slaves, then another group of slaves, and finally achieved gratifying results with the third group. Your Excellency Archbishop, I have achieved preliminary results. I can perform the technique on a subject 9 times in a row. However, whether this method can truly have a therapeutic effect remains to be verified. What do you need? Archbishop Jeroni personally verified his spellcasting level and nodded with satisfaction. Bishop Clint replied fluently. I need a sick dwarf. Or, to be safe, a few more. One day later, several dwarves from the Black Rock tribe were brought to Bishop Clint. The time for you to dedicate yourself to the Lord of Glory and your people is now. Double monthly passes from today to September 30th. From today to September 30th, from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, the crowdfunding reward is 1,500 points, and the author can receive 4 monthly tickets. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please give me a reward. You all give rewards from 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening. Don't waste your monthly pass by leaving it at another time. Heart hurts. Thanks to @bookfriend 201811162038494040 for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to @bookfriend 201907040859403343 for the reward of 100 starting coins. You all set the reward time from 8 p.m. to 24 p.m. You can also crowdfund and save monthly tickets. I am missing 8/5 monthly tickets, my heart aches. Congratulations to everyone for collecting a 10,000 reward, 6,000 words tomorrow.